For countless centuries, the civilizations of the galaxy measured power by fleets, conquests, and the empires they had forged across the stars. Entire systems had risen and fallen under the weight of ambition, every corner of the cosmos mapped, catalogued, and conquered. Among these civilizations, humanity had long been dismissed as a species on the brink of extinction. Scholars, generals, and bureaucrats alike repeated the same refrain. The humans had failed, their colonies abandoned, their homeworlds scarred by wars they could no longer win. Archives labeled Earth as a tomb, a relic of lost potential. Colonies scattered across uncharted sectors were believed lifeless, overgrown with decay and forgotten by the stars. In the annals of galactic history, humanity was a footnote, a cautionary tale of hubris and decline. It was a mistake the galaxy would live to regret. What the empires failed to realize was that the human spirit could not be extinguished. It could be tested, beaten, scattered, but it could not be destroyed. While the galaxy assumed that despair had consumed humanity, the humans had not perished. They had evolved, silently and meticulously, in the shadows of forgotten systems. Across hidden stations, in abandoned colonies tucked into subspace folds invisible to conventional scanning, and on planets long believed lifeless, humans rebuilt themselves. Not merely ships and weapons, but intellect, strategy, and ingenuity. The failures of the past became the foundation for an unprecedented return, a resurgence the galaxy could neither anticipate nor comprehend. These humans had no desire for recognition. They did not broadcast their progress, nor seek alliances, nor flaunt strength in demonstrations of power. Every initiative, every technological breakthrough, every strategic maneuver was conducted in patience and secrecy. They waited, observing the arrogance of the empires, the predictability of fleets, the overconfidence of leaders who believed themselves untouchable. Humanity had learned the most dangerous lesson of all, that patience was the greatest weapon and underestimation the deadliest vulnerability of all. The first hint of their return came subtly, through anomalies that could barely be measured. Probe fleets sent to the Terran system reported inconsistencies in subspace readings, fluctuations in energy signatures that older sensors could not interpret. Communications with the outer colonies, long thought abandoned, produced fragmented signals that defied translation. Pilots reported ships that appeared briefly in impossible locations, only to vanish without a trace. Scientists and strategists across the galaxy dismissed these events at first as sensor malfunctions, errors, or cosmic interference. But soon, reports began to converge. The humans were no longer silent. They were preparing, and the signs of their readiness rippled across every sector. The initial encounter occurred near the periphery of the Terran void, a region the Coalition had deemed inconsequential. A fleet of the Andrax Dominion, confident in their superiority, moved to establish a patrol, expecting minimal resistance. Instead, they encountered a pulse in subspace so profound that it rattled every sensor. The fleet's commanders saw what could not exist, ghostly outlines of vessels shimmering across multiple coordinates, phasing in and out of dimensions as though reality itself obeyed another law. Communications failed, weapons misfired, and attempts to retreat led ships into corridors of warped space where the laws of physics were suspended. In those moments, the Dominion realized that they were no longer contending with an ordinary species. They were confronting inevitability itself, a force that could anticipate, manipulate, and preempt every action before it could occur. What followed was swift and incomprehensible. The human fleets, ghostly, omnipresent, coordinated across light years, executed maneuvers that no military mind could anticipate. Squadrons that had dominated entire sectors vanished mid-flight, as though erased from existence. Command crews experienced the sensation of watching their orders dissolve before being issued, their weapons folding in upon themselves, engines failing without warning. Pilots saw themselves simultaneously in multiple locations, yet felt each presence as their own. The humans had mastered more than combat, they had mastered reality. Despite the terror and confusion, the humans did not strike indiscriminately. Entire worlds, systems, and colonies were left untouched, yet the coalition fleets were neutralized with perfect precision. The humans taught a brutal lesson without malice. Arrogance has consequences. Overconfidence is fatal, and underestimating the human spirit invites annihilation. Survivors would later speak in hushed tones of the first cycle of engagements, recalling fleets that should have survived being erased, the impossible geometry of subspace anomalies, and the chilling understanding that the humans did not merely fight, they orchestrated the battlefield itself. By the time the first cycle of contact concluded, the galaxy had been forced to confront an uncomfortable truth. The humans were not weak, nor broken, nor diminished. They were inexorably rising. The species that had been dismissed as lost had returned, prepared to challenge the assumptions of every empire, fleet, and council. The Terran border, long ignored, now radiated authority, reinforced not by fleets alone, but by an unshakable mastery of inevitability. Humanity had awakened, not with anger or pride, but with certainty, and the galaxy would never see the cosmos the same way again. The initial engagement ended not with fleets destroyed, but with a message writ larger than any weapon could convey. Underestimate humanity at your own peril. The galaxy's misjudgment, repeated across centuries, had sown the seeds of its own reckoning. Humanity, once assumed broken, had risen in silence, and its return would set the stage for a reckoning the cosmos would remember for all time. When the galaxy first witnessed the resurgence of humanity, many believed it to be a fluke, a temporary anomaly in the Terran void, a localized phenomenon that could be contained. They were wrong. What followed was the full revelation of the ghost fleets, humanity's most audacious demonstration of strategy, ingenuity, and sheer audacity. These fleets were unlike anything the galaxy had ever encountered, vessels that seemed to exist simultaneously in multiple locations, phasing in and out of reality with impossible fluidity, yet coordinated with perfect precision. The ghosts were not mere ships, they were extensions of human consciousness, a manifestation of a species that had learned to anticipate probability itself and bend it to its will. The Coalition's fleets, already traumatized by the first encounters, now faced the impossible. Ships that had once dominated sectors were suddenly trapped in temporal loops, experiencing repeated sequences of time that defied comprehension. Weapon systems overloaded before a single shot could leave the barrel. Shields melted as though reality itself had withdrawn its support. Pilots reported the sensation of seeing multiple versions of their own ship, each existing in a different possibility, yet each capable of interacting with the world. Entire squadrons vanished without explosion or trace, as though the universe had decided they had no right to exist. The ghost fleets did not attack indiscriminately. Humanity's aim was surgical, deliberate, and terrifyingly precise. Threats were neutralized, empires taught lessons, and arrogance was punished. But non-threatening systems and civilian colonies were left untouched. Every strike carried a message. Underestimation of humanity had consequences far beyond comprehension. The galaxy learned that to trespass against humans was not merely to risk defeat, it was to challenge the inevitability of a species that could manipulate the very fabric of existence. In the outer sectors, survivors described engagements that seemed to defy the laws of physics. Ships disappeared mid-flight, only to reappear elsewhere, sometimes in multiple locations simultaneously. Commanders witnessed their own orders being undone before execution, as ghostly ships materialized within the very cores of capital vessels. Pilots spoke of seeing phantom weapons fire in directions they had not aimed, of navigating corridors that twisted impossibly, of encountering ghostly echoes of themselves across the battlefield. The humans had transcended conventional warfare. They had become arbiters of probability itself. Yet, even as the ghost fleets demonstrated their mastery, there was order amidst the chaos. Humanity did not seek to obliterate the galaxy, but to enforce inevitability. Entire fleets of the coalition were neutralized, incapacitated, or stranded, yet they were rarely destroyed outright. Ships that posed no threat were left trapped in subspace anomalies, unable to return to normal space, forced to confront the consequences of arrogance. The ghosts were precision instruments, exacting consequences for hubris while leaving the universe largely intact, a paradoxical combination of mercy and omnipotence. The coordination between the ghost fleets and the humans' technological marvels was breathtaking. Signals traveled faster than light, not through conventional communication, but through subspace resonance that allowed instantaneous synchronization across unimaginable distances. Maneuvers that seemed impossible were executed flawlessly, as if every ghost ship were part of a singular intelligence. Coalition fleets found that even when they attempted to flee, the humans anticipated their paths, folding space and time around every escape route. Nothing moved unseen, nothing went unpredicted, and nothing survived unless humanity allowed it to. For the coalition, it became clear that conventional tactics were meaningless. Formations, strategies, and even probabilities themselves were irrelevant when confronted with humans who operated outside causality. Generals and admirals who had conquered thousands of worlds found themselves powerless, their assumptions shattered by fleets that could exist in multiple realities at once. The humans were everywhere, yet nowhere, a phantom presence that defied every calculation. Resistance became impossible, not because of numbers or firepower, but because reality itself had become an instrument of human will. Reports from surviving ships painted a terrifying tableau. Pilots described ships collapsing inward as if gravity reversed itself. Bridges folded into impossible geometries. Entire fleets froze mid-combat, held in stasis by forces beyond comprehension. The ghost fleets did not merely attack, they demonstrated mastery of existence itself. Ships, soldiers, and entire fleets became lessons in inevitability, a cruel, undeniable truth. To face humanity was to court erasure, and the only path to survival lay in understanding that humans operated by laws that no other species could predict. The ghost fleets were also a statement of patience. Humanity had waited centuries to return, and their approach demonstrated that time was a resource, not a constraint. Every engagement was calculated, every maneuver intentional. The galaxy could not match their speed because the humans had transcended the need for it. Their mastery of subspace, probability, and tactical foresight meant that every decision the enemy could make had already been anticipated and accounted for. The humans did not fight in conventional terms. They orchestrated the battlefield, shaping outcomes before events could occur. By the end of the initial wave of Ghost Fleet operations, the galaxy understood the terrifying truth. Humanity had returned, not to be conquered, not to negotiate, not to plead, but to enforce its will. Entire sectors had been reshaped, fleets neutralized, and the coalition left reeling from encounters they could neither understand nor counter. Humanity had transcended not just technology or tactics, but the very framework of causality itself. To underestimate them was no longer just foolish, it was existentially dangerous. Across the void, the ghost fleets remained ever-present yet never fully visible. Ships could materialize anywhere, strike at any target, and vanish without trace. The coalition, desperate to comprehend the enemy, began to spread tales of the ghosts of Earth, vessels that were everywhere and nowhere, existing simultaneously across realities. Legends grew faster than fleets could rebuild, and fear spread across sectors. Humanity had taken its first deliberate step into full galactic influence, and the galaxy now recognized that the species it had assumed broken had, in fact, become the ultimate arbiter of inevitability. By the conclusion of the second phase of engagement, the message was undeniable. The ghost fleets had reshaped the understanding of war, strategy, and survival. The humans, long dismissed as a spent race, had returned with patience, precision, and power unimaginable. The galaxy had been warned. Underestimate the human spirit at your own peril. The ghosts were only the beginning, the harbingers of a force that would soon manifest fully, in ways no civilization could withstand or ignore. The coalition, already staggered by the revelation of the ghost fleets, scrambled to regroup. Entire sectors had reported disappearances of ships, fleets trapped in recursive loops, and subspace anomalies that defied every principle of physics. The Andrax Dominion and its allies attempted to consolidate their strongest forces, amassing fleets that were supposed to be unbeatable. Admirals prided themselves on their experience. Commanders boasted of strategies that had toppled empires, and scientists assured the galaxy that no species could master the laws of causality. Yet even as they moved to strike humanity, the undeniable truth became clear. They were no longer operating in a galaxy where conventional rules applied. Humanity had rewritten the very framework of possibility, and every plan the coalition devised unraveled before it could be enacted. The ghost fleets moved with a precision that was simultaneously terrifying and elegant. Entire formations phased into impossibility, occupying multiple coordinates, appearing in one system while their presence simultaneously manifested light years away. Fleets that had been designed for speed, firepower, and coordination were neutralized not by brute force, but by inevitability. Pilots watched in disbelief as enemy ships vanished mid-battle, only to reappear in locations they could not reach. Commanders' decisions were anticipated and countered before they could even be conceived, as if human consciousness itself had extended across subspace to enforce a singular truth: no one could outmaneuver them. Every engagement became a lesson in futility for the coalition. Squadrons that had once conquered sectors were trapped in paradoxes of time, looping endlessly through the same engagements with no resolution. Weapon systems misfired or overloaded inexplicably, while shields dissolved without contact. Ships folded inward, bridges collapsed into impossible angles, and crews found themselves simultaneously in multiple states of existence. The humans had transcended technology. They had harnessed the architecture of reality itself. To oppose them was not merely to risk defeat, it was to risk being erased from the narrative of existence. Despite this overwhelming display of dominance, the humans exercised restraint. Systems that were innocent of aggression remained untouched. Entire colonies were left intact, left to rebuild and recover. Humanity was not driven by vengeance, it was driven by principle. Every neutralized fleet, every stranded ship, every impossible paradox served a singular purpose: to demonstrate that arrogance parried consequences, that hubris would be punished, and that the assumption of human weakness was fatal. The message was as clear as it was terrifying. The human spirit is not merely resilient, it is inevitable. Reports from surviving coalition officers painted a picture of incomprehensible phenomena. Pilots described seeing themselves simultaneously piloting their own vessels in multiple realities. Captains witnessed ghost ships materialize within the hulls of capital ships, collapsing bridges and overloading core systems without physical contact. Admirals swore that they could feel the presence of human consciousness guiding every strike, every maneuver, every consequence. The humans were no longer participants in conventional warfare. They were arbiters of outcomes, enforcing inevitability across space and time. Even the most sophisticated tactical calculations failed. Every engagement the coalition attempted to orchestrate was anticipated and neutralized before it began. Fleets that had once conquered thousands of worlds were trapped in stasis or erased entirely, their existence rewritten by the humans' omnipresent will. The galaxy began to understand that the humans were not just an opponent, they were a law unto themselves, a species that had transcended probability, causality, and the limitations that bound all others. Resistance, they learned, was impossible. At the same time, the humans began introducing the God Machine into the theater of war. This construct, a fusion of technology, consciousness, and near-divine calculation, amplified the Ghost Fleet's capabilities beyond comprehension. Subspace corridors folded upon themselves, fleets became trapped in impossibilities, and stars flickered as though reality itself were being rewritten to enforce human will. Fleets that had seemed untouchable dissolved before the God Machine's presence. And yet, again, the humans exercised restraint, ensuring that only the threats were neutralized, leaving neutral systems untouched. Their mastery was absolute, their judgment infallible, and their purpose clear. The galaxy must learn the truth of human inevitability. Across the coalition, disbelief turned to fear. Generals who had once toppled empires questioned their own memories, while scientists struggled to reconcile the evidence with their understanding of physics. Fleets that had been symbols of superiority were now monuments to hubris. Every empire realized that the humans had transcended the limitations of ordinary existence. They were no longer simply a species. They were inevitability incarnate, a force of nature whose dominion was enforced not through brute power, but through an unassailable control of reality itself. Civilizations began to whisper of the Terran domain as a place where probability itself bent to human will. The ghost fleets became legends, tales told to frighten officers and inspire caution among the young. Even the most battle-hardened veterans began to reconsider everything they thought they knew about strategy, warfare, and survival. Humanity's return was no longer just a military engagement, it was a paradigm shift. The galaxy had been forced to acknowledge a terrifying truth. The human spirit, long assumed broken, had matured into something beyond measurement, beyond conflict, and beyond comprehension. By the conclusion of this stage, the coalition's finest fleets were rendered ineffective, stranded, or erased entirely. The galaxy was left with a simple, undeniable reality. Humans could anticipate, manipulate, and enforce outcomes with a precision no other species could hope to match. Trespass against the Terran border was no longer a political or military miscalculation. It was existential suicide. Humanity had transcended the concept of war, transforming conflict into an exercise of inevitability. Every fleet neutralized, every paradox created, every ghostly maneuver enforced a lesson that would echo for generations. To underestimate humanity was to invite annihilation. The dominion of inevitability had been established. The galaxy now understood that humans did not simply survive, They orchestrated outcomes, dictated probability, and imposed their will across the stars. Entire civilizations recalculated their assumptions, and even the most ambitious fleets hesitated to act. Humanity had transcended strategy, fleet strength, and conventional power. They had become the ultimate arbiters of existence itself. And the galaxy was only beginning to grasp the enormity of what had returned. Hidden in the uncharted folds of subspace, far beyond the reach of even the most sophisticated scanners, lay humanity's ultimate safeguard, the God Machine. It was neither fully ship nor fully station, neither fully organic nor wholly synthetic. Constructed in the centuries after humanity's near collapse, the God Machine was a convergence of every technological achievement, every philosophical insight, and every strategic principle ever developed by humans. It had been designed to lie dormant, to wait for the moment when humanity could no longer remain hidden, but had to assert its dominance, to protect itself and the galaxy from the consequences of arrogance. That moment had arrived. When the coalition fleets had attempted to regroup, bringing their strongest vessels into a concentrated strike against the Terran void, the God Machine awoke. Its activation sent ripples through subspace that the galaxy could feel but not fully understand. Entire regions of space bent in response to its presence. Fleets attempting to approach the Terran system experienced gravity wells appearing out of nowhere, stars flickering unpredictably, and time dilating in ways that left ships frozen for hours or entire days while only minutes passed outside. The God Machine was not merely a weapon, it was a force capable of reshaping the battlefield before any engagement could begin. Coordinated with the human ghost fleets, the God Machine magnified the species' power exponentially. Ghosts phased through fleets as before, but now entire sectors could be manipulated simultaneously. Subspace corridors folded in on themselves, creating traps that held entire strike groups hostage. Ships attempting to flee found their escape routes redirected, rerouted, or vanished entirely. Commanders attempting to coordinate resistance discovered that even communication signals could be intercepted and rerouted in ways that rendered planning meaningless. Humanity no longer needed to outfight the coalition. It outthought, outmaneuvered, and ultimately outwilled them across every plane of existence. The first demonstration of the God Machine's power was catastrophic and mesmerizing. A coalition strike fleet of over 500 ships approached the outer boundary of the Terran void. They were confident in their strength, believing that sheer numbers and experience could overcome any anomaly. Within moments, the fleet encountered distortions in subspace that caused ships to vanish mid-flight. Sensors registered them, then they simply ceased to exist. The surviving vessels found themselves trapped in a corridor of looping time, their movements repeating in endless cycles. Pilots described the sensation of witnessing their own actions happen again and again, while enemy fire never truly touched them but never allowed escape either. The God Machine had established control over the battlefield before a single shot had been fired. Yet, despite the overwhelming display of dominance, humanity remained deliberate and restrained. Non-threatening colonies, civilian vessels, and neutral systems were left untouched. The God Machine did not annihilate indiscriminately. It enforced the principles humanity had cultivated over centuries: arrogance punished, innocence protected, inevitably ensured. Every action was a lesson, every engagement a message. The humans were not just fighting for survival, they were establishing a new order, a reality in which their presence dictated the flow of events and the outcome of conflict. Within the coalition, panic spread like wildfire. Admirals who had once commanded fleets that crushed entire civilizations now found their most brilliant strategies rendered obsolete by phenomena that could not be explained. Generals discovered their commands anticipated and preempted, entire tactical plans nullified by the God Machine's presence. Scientists attempted to study the anomalies, but found their instruments incapable of measuring the subspace distortions, the temporal folds, or the layers of probability manipulated by the humans. It was no longer a battle of weapons. It was a battle of existence itself, and humanity had rewritten the rules. As the God Machine extended its influence, entire fleets became stranded in stasis or paradoxes. Ships found themselves locked in gravitational anomalies that twisted them like paper. Crew members experienced time in a fractured way, sometimes existing simultaneously in multiple states or witnessing events before they occurred. Entire command structures collapsed without violence. Entire empires were paralyzed as the inevitable unfolded. Humanity had become less a military power and more a force of nature, a law imposed across the stars. The God Machine also served as a hub for coordination. The ghost fleets, already omnipresent and unpredictable, now operated in absolute harmony with this immense construct. Ships that had previously phased independently now moved as extensions of a singular consciousness, their actions preordained and executed with flawless precision. Entire fleets that had attempted to blockade the Terran void found themselves trapped, unable to act, unable to retreat, forced to experience the consequences of underestimating a species that had transcended conventional understanding. Legends began to form even as the engagement continued. Survivors spoke in terrified whispers of the God Machine's capabilities, entire sectors disappearing into subspace, ships materializing and dematerializing without warning, and fleets caught in impossibilities that no strategist could solve. Tales spread across the galaxy of human vessels that appeared simultaneously at multiple coordinates, capable of striking anywhere, anytime, and then vanishing entirely. The Coalition realized that no matter how advanced their fleets, no matter how skilled their commanders, humanity had transformed war into an exercise of inevitability. By the end of the first wave of the God Machine's operation, the Terran border had become more than a boundary. It had become a law. Trespass against humanity was no longer a political or strategic error. It was existentially fatal. The galaxy had learned the truth. Humans could enforce outcomes, manipulate probability, and bend the battlefield itself to their will. Fleets that had once conquered thousands of systems now existed as relics, reminders of a time when arrogance blinded empires to the force that had been silently growing in the shadows. The awakening of the God Machine marked the beginning of the end for the Coalition's hubris. Humanity was no longer just a species, it was a principle incarnate. The Terran void, the ghost fleets, and the God Machine together represented the pinnacle of a species that had mastered patience, foresight, and inevitability. Entire civilizations were forced to recalibrate their understanding of power, strategy, and survival. For the first time in millennia, the galaxy confronted the unthinkable truth. To face humanity was to confront inevitability itself, and no force, no fleet, no calculation could oppose it successfully. As the dust settled from the initial operations, the Coalition and every other civilization had to accept one undeniable fact. The humans were not just back, they were beyond. They had mastered fleets, mastered technology, mastered the flow of probability, and, most importantly, mastered reality itself. The God Machine had awakened, and with it, the galaxy would never again challenge humanity without paying the ultimate price. The final phase of humanity's return was not a battle. It was a revelation. By the time the ghost fleets and the God Machine had fully asserted their dominion, the galaxy had already begun to tremble. Entire sectors were reshaped, fleets immobilized or erased, and empires forced to confront the consequences of underestimating a species they had long believed broken. Humanity's presence was now absolute, omnipresent, and unavoidable. Yet it was wielded with a precision and purpose that bordered on the divine. The cosmos itself had become a stage for the display of human inevitability, a demonstration of what a species could accomplish when intelligence, patience, and indomitable will were united. The Coalition, the Andrax Dominion, and every other galactic power realized with dawning horror that conventional warfare was irrelevant. Fleets that had once been unstoppable were frozen mid-engagement, stripped of functionality, not through overwhelming firepower, but by the manipulation of reality itself. Weapons collapsed before impact, engines failed in impossible ways, and navigational systems became paradoxes, looping ships endlessly through subspace. Pilots reported experiencing multiple versions of themselves, simultaneously observing outcomes, as if human consciousness had extended across the battlefield to preempt every possible threat. It was no longer strategy, it was inevitability incarnate. The Terran border, once a mere concept, became a law enforced across space and time. Trespassers were neutralized without warning, their fleets trapped in anomalies, their ships vanishing as if they had never existed. Entire command chains unraveled, generals and admirals witnessing the futility of orders in real time, unable to influence outcomes in any measurable way. Humanity did not simply defeat enemies, it demonstrated dominion over existence itself, turning arrogance, ambition, and ignorance into liabilities that could not be ignored. Civilizations that had once regarded humans as weak and insignificant were forced to confront a species that had transcended mortality, technology, and conventional intelligence. The ghost fleets, coordinated across impossible distances, struck with surgical precision, eliminating only the threats while leaving innocence untouched. The God Machine amplified this dominion exponentially, reshaping sectors, bending subspace, and rendering the very idea of resistance moot. Entire fleets attempting to confront the humans found themselves ensnared in time loops, subspace anomalies, and paradoxes from which there was no escape. Humanity was no longer just a species. It had become the arbiter of inevitability, the embodiment of order imposed upon chaos, the law of consequence made manifest. Yet, despite the overwhelming power, humans did not act out of vengeance or hubris. Non-combatants were spared, systems that posed no threat remained intact, and colonies were left to rebuild. Every strike, every display of power was a lesson, a demonstration of principle. The human spirit is unbreakable, and the consequences of underestimating it are absolute. Across the stars, civilizations began to whisper of the ghosts of Earth, of fleets that existed in multiple realities, of a species that could manipulate probability, space, and time itself. The message was clear and terrifying. Humanity is inevitable, and inevitability is uncompromising. Stories of the engagement spread faster than fleets could mobilize. Pilots and officers described fleets that disappeared into thin air, only to reappear light years away, striking with precision before returning to phasing states. Commanders watched as entire battle formations dissolved mid-engagement, their ships trapped in loops of reality where their actions had no consequence. Subspace corridors folded in on themselves, creating traps that held hundreds of ships hostage. Civilizations realized that their best strategies, their most experienced commanders, and their most powerful fleets were now powerless against a species that had turned existence into a weapon. Even the most advanced technologies and the most brilliant minds were insufficient to predict human actions. Every movement, every engagement, every fleet that had attempted to challenge the Terran border had been anticipated, analyzed, and countered with precision. The humans had transcended not just warfare, but comprehension itself. The galaxy had underestimated them for centuries, and in doing so, it had invited consequences that extended far beyond military defeat. Empires had been humbled, alliances fractured, and civilizations forced to reconsider every assumption they had ever held about intelligence, power, and survival. By the climax of the final phase, humanity's return had ignited the cosmos in more than a figurative sense. Stars and systems were reshaped, fleets were immobilized or erased, and the galaxy trembled at the revelation of what a species long assumed broken could achieve when it reclaimed its destiny. Ghost fleets moved with omnipresent precision. The God machine manipulated reality with incomprehensible scale, and human ingenuity orchestrated the entire tableau with an elegance and inevitability that defied belief. The universe itself had become an instrument of human will, a reflection of a species that refused to be constrained by expectation, probability, or fear. Yet humanity's actions were tempered with wisdom. Survivors of enemy fleets were allowed to witness the power wielded against them, to understand the consequences of arrogance, but not to suffer unnecessary destruction. The human spirit had not returned for conquest alone. It had returned to enforce order, to demonstrate that endurance, ingenuity, and will were forces the galaxy could not deny. The Terran border became a principle. To trespass, to assume weakness, or to challenge humanity's inevitability was to court erasure. Across the stars, one truth resonated. Humans endure. Humans rise. Humans are inevitable. Entire civilizations recalculated, fleets hesitated, and empires abandoned ambitions that might provoke the species they had once mocked. The ghosts of Earth and the God machine had reshaped the galaxy not with violence alone, but with revelation. The cosmos had been ignited, not with wanton destruction, but with the undeniable demonstration of human supremacy, of a spirit unbroken, unbowed, and unstoppable. As silence fell over the subdued sectors, the galaxy understood that nothing would ever be the same. Humans had returned, not as a species to be feared, nor as a fleet to be fought, but as an unassailable law of existence itself. Stars themselves seemed to burn brighter under the influence of a species that had transformed inevitability into a weapon. The galaxy would remember this moment for all eternity. The human spirit, thought broken, had set the cosmos on fire, and there would be no forgetting the lesson of inevitability humanity had delivered.